My family banned me from Thanksgiving after I paid, but I secretly gave them a surprise gift. The turkey's already in the oven. The potatoes are peeled, soaking in cold water. My fridge is full, every shelf packed from top to bottom with trays of stuffing cranberry sauce pies, casseroles, each one labeled for heat up time and temperature. I even bought a folding table from Target last week, just so there'd be room for everyone. That's how sure I was they'd all show up. My name is Cassandra. I'm 37 and I live in a small house just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's not much, just a single story with creaky floors and curtains that fade more each year, but I've spent months getting it ready for this one day. Thanksgiving. Last month, my sister Nicole started a group chat with my mom, our two brothers, and my cousin Janie. She asked where we wanted to have Thanksgiving this year. I replied first eager, maybe too eager, saying I can host. I'll cover the cost too. Just bring yourselves. And no one objected. Not at first. So I went ahead. I booked the catering for the appetizers. I bought the tablecloths. I deep cleaned the house. My paycheck, what little was left of it after rent, went to a giant butterball turkey I could barely lift into the cart. I was tired but hopeful. That's all I wanted, a warm room full of family. But something shifted. A week before Thanksgiving, the group chat grew quieter. Nicole stopped responding to my questions. My mother said she was still thinking it over but didn't explain. Then 2 days before the holiday, I saw the post. A photo of a set table at my cousin Janie's place with gold-trimmed plates and fancy name cards. Nicole had commented, "Can't wait under it." My mom added a heart emoji. My name was nowhere to be found. Still, I waited. Maybe it was just a brunch. Maybe they'd still come to mine in the evening. I kept the lights on. I lit candles. I changed the hand towels in the guest bathroom. At 4 p.m., I started to worry. At 6 p.m., I set the table anyway. And at 7:12 p.m., I opened Instagram and watched them all smiling around Janie's charcuterie board. Nicole had posted a boomerang of their wine glasses clinking together. The caption said, "Grateful for this tribe." I checked the group chat. Not a single message. I scrolled up to the top. My offer was still there. My heart dropped into my shoes. They hadn't just changed plans. They'd left me behind. No call, no explanation. And not one person offered to reimburse me. The receipt from the caterer was still on my counter, $312.47 paid in full. I stared at it, gripping the edge of the sink like it might keep me upright. Tell me, would you have reached out? Would you have called them? Or would you have just sat down at that oversized table, eaten your slice of pie alone, and pretended the silence was enough? Because that's what I did. I sat there in the middle of my perfectly set table, surrounded by untouched food in a house full of effort that nobody acknowledged. I took a single bite of sweet potato casserole and couldn't taste a thing. Then I cried. The kind of cry you do, silently, shoulders shaking while the candles keep flickering, like the night hasn't noticed anything's gone wrong. What do you do when you give people everything and they don't even tell you they won't show up? The next morning I woke up to the smell of cold gravy and untouched rolls. The air still smelled like Thanksgiving, but the warmth was gone. Everything I'd prepared the day before now sat stiff and silent in the fridge, covered in foil, waiting for mouths that never came. I didn't have the heart to throw it away yet. It felt too final. I made coffee, but I didn't drink it. I just stood at the counter holding the mug in both hands, staring at my phone. Maybe someone would check in now. Maybe someone would say, "Hey, we should have come to you." That wasn't fair. But no. Instead, Nicole posted a selfie with our cousin Janie and their kids, all holding mini pumpkin pies. The caption read, "So thankful for family traditions. Grateful." There was a tag list. I clicked it. Janie, my brother David, my other brother Mark, Nicole, my mom, her boyfriend. Even Janie's dog had been tagged. Not me. Not even a vague, half-hearted mention like "wish everyone could be here." Nothing. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased, scrubbed clean from the narrative. It's strange how people you share blood with can make you feel like a ghost in your own story. I called my mom. I didn't plan to. I didn't even think I would. But my thumb was already pressing her name before I could talk myself out of it. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. So I texted, "Hey Mom, just wondering, did something happen? Why did everyone end up at Janie's?" She read it. I saw the little scene bubble. No reply. Hours passed. The sun moved across my living room wall. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching a Lifetime movie I wasn't paying attention to. My phone buzzed. Finally. "Nicole. Oh, it was just easier for everyone to meet there. Didn't think you'd mind since you said you'd handle food anyway. Hope that's okay." Handle food. Was that all? I was the help, the caterer, a walking grocery budget. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself not to write something I'd regret. But regret was already curling inside me like smoke. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the principle. The total lack of consideration. The way they just moved forward without even the decency to loop me in. Later that night, my niece Nicole's daughter posted a TikTok. It was a sped-up montage of the family Thanksgiving. Laughter, dancing, Nicole doing a fake toast with a plastic wine glass. The camera panned across the dinner table where everyone was smiling, eating clinking forks and glasses. The caption said, "Best Thanksgiving ever." In the background, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The mashed potatoes. My mashed potatoes. I had a very specific way of making them with roasted garlic and a swirl of cream cheese folded in just before serving. It was a recipe I invented back in college, the one dish everyone used to say they couldn't go a year without. They'd taken the food I paid for, the food I made, and used it at someone else's table, and still didn't invite me. It was like I had been reduced to a pantry, a ghost with a grocery list. That night I tried to sleep, but couldn't. The house was too quiet, too full of leftovers and empty chairs. I thought of deleting social media, but I didn't. I wanted to see if anyone would tag me, mention me, acknowledge me. No one did. Instead, I watched them laugh from the screen like they lived on a different planet, one I no longer had access to. And the worst part, it wasn't shocking. Not really. Not if I was honest with myself. They'd been forgetting me in small ways for years, canceling plans, leaving me off family calls, brushing off my ideas like they didn't matter. This was just the first time it had been so loud, so public, so undeniable. What does it say about a family that can forget someone who fed them? If they could forget me now after everything I gave, what else had they already erased? The hardest part wasn't being excluded. It was knowing that I'd handed them the excuse to do it. I paid. I offered. I volunteered myself like I always did. That was the pattern, Cassandra the giver. Cassandra the fixer Cassandra, who makes things easier for everyone but herself. I told myself I was doing it out of love, that if I gave enough they'd finally see me, appreciate me. But what I'd really done was give them the chance to take, and they took everything except me. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed in bed, my head replaying every little moment that led up to this, every ignored message, every slight that I had brushed off, every half smile from my mother when I brought up plans, every "we'll see" that meant not you. I remembered texting my brother David a week earlier, asking if he could help me move the dining table into the living room for more space. Sure, he'd said. Just remind me that morning. But he never showed. I moved it myself, pulled a muscle in my shoulder and told no one. Just like always. And then there was my sister Nicole. 2 weeks ago she'd called me in tears because her youngest had the flu and she needed a break. I picked up her dry cleaning, dropped off Gatorade, and brought soup. She didn't even say thank you. Just, "You're a lifesaver," before hanging up. I kept thinking that if I did enough of those little things eventually, I'd earn my place at the table. But I was wrong. The morning after Thanksgiving, the house was still quiet. I looked around at all the leftovers, perfectly good food, and realized I couldn't stomach any of it. I packed it into containers, drove it down to the shelter on 9th and Elm. They were grateful. One man looked me straight in the eye and said, Thank you. Just that. 2 words. But they hit harder than anything I'd gotten from my family in years. On the way home, I stopped at the mailbox. Inside was a card from my workplace. Just a generic happy holidays from HR signed with printed names. Still, the irony made me laugh. Everyone remembers me when there's a task to be done. When someone's sick, broke moving, stranded, hungry. That's when I'm needed. That's when my phone lights up. But when there's a celebration, a dinner, a photo op, suddenly I'm invisible. I sat in my car for a long time. The engine off. The air cold. My fingers curled around the steering wheel. I didn't cry this time. I just stared at the dashboard like it might hold answers. And for the first time, I let myself feel the anger. Not the hurt, not the confusion, but the raw, sharp anger that had been buried under years of it's okay, and I understand. It wasn't okay. They took my money, my time, my food, my labor, my energy, and they left me behind without even the decency of an explanation. So I asked myself, what would happen if I stopped giving, if I stopped answering the phone, stopped volunteering, stopped bending over backwards? Would they even notice? Would they miss me? Or just the things I did for them? I knew the answer, and it burned. But the burn woke me up, because maybe, just maybe, being left out was the best thing they could have done for me. It showed me exactly where I stood. It showed me that my worth in their eyes had limits. And now, I was done pretending not to see it. I was done giving in. And for the first time in a very long time, I started thinking about what I'd do if I gave all that energy to myself instead. If you had the choice, if your own family used you like this, would you keep showing up? Would you keep pouring from a cup they never refilled? Or would you finally take it back? It was Saturday morning when the photo found me. I hadn't asked for it. I wasn't searching anymore. I had decided to stay off social media at least for a while, but that's the thing about family, they creep into your life even when you try to block the door. The photo was in a group text from my Aunt Carol. She meant well, I think. She sent it with a simple message. Such a lovely time with the whole gang this year. Hope everyone is staying warm. Attached was the photo. There they were, my entire family, arms linked around a long wooden table. The table I'd lent them last year because Janie didn't have enough seating. I remembered wrapping it in moving blankets and asking David to help load it into his truck. He'd grumbled the whole time, but I still smiled. I always did. And there it was, now covered in gold runners and candles. Plates full of my food, unmistakably mine, the honey-glazed carrots. I slow roast with nutmeg, the mac and cheese with the burnt cheddar crust. My dishes on someone else's table. My mother sat at the center smiling like she didn't have a daughter missing from that frame. Nicole had her arm around Janie, their matching scarves draped like they planned it. Mark's kids were making faces, and even that made me ache, because I would have laughed. I would have kissed their foreheads and pretended the burnt rolls weren't burnt. I would have cleaned up after everyone without complaint. I always did. I sat there staring at that photo while my untouched Tupperware sat cold in the fridge behind me. That picture didn't just hurt, it burned, because there was space on that bench. Room for one more. And yet no one thought to say, "Where's Cassandra?" I didn't respond to my aunt. I didn't ask questions. What was left to ask? But I did go into the guest room, where I'd laid out the spare blankets and washed the pillowcases in lavender detergent. I stood in the doorway and stared at the folded towels on the nightstand, the little handwritten sign I'd made for my niece, Aunt Cassie's cozy corner, no parents allowed. She used to love that. Last year she ran in and jumped on the bed yelling, "Mine, mine, mine," and I'd laughed so hard I nearly cried. This year, she didn't come. Not even a text. That photo made it clear I was a ghost in their memory, a convenience they no longer needed. I opened my closet and found the Thanksgiving wreath I hadn't even gotten to hang on the door. It still had the tag on it. And right then a thought crept in, slow, quiet, but steady. They don't deserve me. Not the me who cooks and decorates and gives. Not even the me who forgives without asking. Especially not her. So I took the wreath and the extra blankets and packed them into a storage bin. I peeled the guest name tags off the plates and tossed them. And then I sat down, lit a single candle at the table, and made a new promise. No more giving to people who don't see you. No more handing over kindness like coupons hoping someone will eventually redeem it. They showed me what I meant to them in one photo. And now, I was going to show them what I meant to myself. Do you know that moment? That flicker of clarity when pain becomes purpose. When the ache shifts into a vow. It doesn't come all at once, but when it does, something in you changes. Something in me did. There's a kind of stillness that follows betrayal. Not the loud crashing kind, but the quiet hum that fills your house when you realize no one's coming. That's the silence I sat in. Room by room, my home still bore their names. The folded towels, the scented candles in the bathroom, the juice boxes in the fridge for Mark's kids. All of it waited like I was hosting a party that simply never began. The guest room was the hardest. I hadn't just prepped it. I'd made it personal, thoughtful. I'd ironed the pillowcases, put out extra chargers, placed a chocolate on each nightstand. Little touches I'd copied from a boutique inn I once stayed in. I wanted them to feel welcomed. Wanted them to feel the kind of care I never really got growing up. It's strange how we try to give people what we've always needed. But that room, my best effort, sat untouched. I walked in that morning and stood still. Just breathed. The air smelled like fabric softener and disappointment. At the foot of the bed was the framed photo of all of us from Thanksgiving 3 years ago. The last time everyone had been at my place. My arm was around Nicole, our cheeks pressed together, and we looked like real sisters. Like the kind of family that calls, that stays late, that fights and forgives before dessert is even served. I picked up the frame. My hand didn't shake, but something inside did, and slowly I turned the photo face down. That was the moment I decided not to chase them anymore. Not to send the awkward follow-up texts. Not to ask what I did wrong. Because I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just stopped being useful. The days that followed were quiet but not empty. I kept my distance. Didn't like posts. Didn't comment. Just observed. The world kept spinning. Nicole bragged about her homemade apple pie, which I recognized as the same frozen one I gave her last year. Mark joked about how much food they had left over. No one mentioned my name. It was like I'd been erased, but the outline of me still lingered in every caption. Then 5 days after Thanksgiving, I got a group message. It was Janie. She sent a generic thanks again. Everyone, such a beautiful evening. Couldn't have done it without you all, with a bunch of heart emojis. Again, everyone was tagged, except me. And then she added, special thanks to whoever brought the extra rolls lifesaver. I delivered them to Janie's porch that morning, still warm, before I even realized they'd changed venues. That's when the betrayal truly sank in. I wasn't just left out. I had fed them even in my absence. I was the invisible guest, contributing but never invited. And somehow, they were fine with that. I could have said something. Could have exposed it right then. But I didn't. Instead, I stood in my hallway staring at that quiet guest room and realized it wasn't mine anymore. None of this needed to be theirs. That's when something in me shifted. Not just anger, not just sadness. Resolve. I had been bending over backwards for years. Always the peacemaker, the giver, the dependable one. What would happen if I stopped? If I let go of the room, the photo, the expectation, and instead poured that same love into myself, into a life they didn't get to touch anymore. I opened the closet and pulled out the small suitcase I kept tucked behind winter coats. It was old, the zipper stubborn, but it felt right in my hands. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew I was leaving something behind. Tell me, have you ever looked around your own home and felt like a stranger in it? Felt like every detail, every corner was shaped by people who only show up when it benefits them. If you had a room like that, a room still waiting for someone who never came, would you keep waiting? Or would you finally close the door? The suitcase sat at the edge of my bed like a question I hadn't answered yet. I wasn't packing to run. I wasn't even sure I was going anywhere. But touching the zipper, hearing the faint click as it came undone, gave me a small kind of control I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't know what to pack, so instead I started cleaning, moving, sorting, reclaiming. That's when I found the shoebox. It was buried behind old tax folders and unused holiday wrapping paper. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were photos. real printed photos from back when people still used cameras and drugstore developing. Thanksgiving at my parents' house when I was 22. Nicole holding her first baby. Mark carving the turkey with too much confidence and too little skill. My mom in her old pink apron, the one with the frilly edge she claimed she hated but never threw out. And there I was, in almost every picture, holding someone's kid, carrying someone's coat, clearing plates, smiling like someone who still believed if she did enough they'd finally see her. I sat cross-legged on the carpet shoebox in my lap and cried like that girl had died, because she had in a way. I used to believe family meant something unbreakable, that no matter how tired you were, no matter how overlooked the bond was worth fighting for. But as I flipped through each photo, I started seeing the truth I hadn't wanted to admit for years. They never really saw me. I was always the helper, the extra hands, the person who ran to the store last minute for the things they forgot, the person who stayed after to clean up while the others slipped out with leftover pies and full bellies. Even the year my niece broke her arm, I remember it so vividly. It was the day before Thanksgiving. Nicole had called me, sobbing panicked, said she couldn't drive. I rushed across town, took them both to the ER, waited for hours with her daughter curled up in my lap. We didn't get home until nearly 2 a.m., but I still cooked the entire meal the next day while they all slept in. No one mentioned it that year. Not then, not ever. Just like they didn't mention me now. I looked at those photos at my younger self trying so hard and I whispered, "You deserved better." Not just from them, but from me. I deserved to stop begging for scraps of affection. To stop proving my worth to people who had already decided what I was to them. Disposable. Interchangeable. Convenient. The fracture had been there for years, but it took this Thanksgiving to finally split me open. It's funny how holidays are supposed to bring families closer, but sometimes they just reveal how far apart you've really grown. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the leaves had mostly fallen. Bare branches reached across the street like aching arms. My neighbor was stringing Christmas lights across their porch, humming something cheerful under their breath. The world didn't stop just because I had. And maybe that was the most grounding part of it all. Life moves forward even when people leave you behind. Even when they rewrite the story and erase your part in it. The suitcase was still open on my bed, half full now, with pajamas, a warm sweater, a book I never finished. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew I needed space. A break from the house, from the silence, from the echo of rooms I'd decorated for people who never came. I picked up my phone and stared at the lock screen. No new texts, no missed calls. Not one person had reached out, not even to lie. And that told me everything I needed to know. So I closed the shoebox, slid it back into the closet, and zipped up the suitcase. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. If you'd seen those photos, those moments where you were present but never truly there, what would you have done? Would you forgive, forget, or finally remember who you are when no one's watching? The message came just as I was locking my front door, suitcase in hand. It was from my mother. Simple, sharp, familiar. "You're overreacting." That was it. Not "how are you?" Not "we missed you." Not even what happened. Just a declaration that whatever I felt was invalid. I didn't respond right away. I stood there on my porch, the morning sun struggling to cut through the pale November fog, my breath forming clouds in the air. The suitcase handle felt heavy in my hand, but not as heavy as the words in that text. "You're overreacting." It was her signature move. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, even gently, even carefully, that phrase always came back like a slap with a silk glove. When I was 12 and asked why Nicole got a birthday party and I didn't, "You're overreacting." When I was 17 and told her it hurt that she never came to my high school concerts, "Don't be so dramatic." When I was 29 and asked her to stop joking about my weight in front of the family, "It's just teasing. You're too sensitive." The pattern was old, worn in like the handle of that suitcase. But this time, it hit differently. Maybe because this time I hadn't even asked for anything. I'd just been forgotten, erased, and now I was being told it was my fault for noticing. I set the suitcase down, sat on the front step, and stared at that message for a long time. It sat there in its little gray bubble, pulsing with all the years I'd swallowed my pride. my pain, my voice. And then I did something new. I typed back, "You're right, I am reacting, but not over. Just enough." Then I hit send. My heart pounded, but not with fear, with clarity. I didn't owe them a perfectly worded essay about how I felt. I didn't need to debate my worth like it was up for a family vote. I wasn't a child needing permission to feel anymore. I was a grown woman who had been hurt, and that was enough. I stood up and rolled the suitcase down the steps. I wasn't running away, I was stepping out. Sometimes distance is the only way to see things clearly. At the bus station, I bought a ticket to a small mountain town I'd visited once during a work conference. I remembered it being quiet with kind people and big trees. A place where no one knew my name, but also no one had decided what it meant. As the bus pulled away, I let the silence stretch. No notifications, no apologies, just the hum of tires on cold asphalt and the faint sound of someone behind me unwrapping a sandwich. I watched the town fade behind me through the window. I wasn't sure how long I'd be gone. A weekend, a week, maybe longer. All I knew was that I needed air that wasn't saturated with expectation. I needed time to remember who I was when I wasn't cast in the role of the family's unpaid therapist, chef, babysitter, errand runner. I needed peace, a place where my thoughts could land without being told they were too loud. And maybe most of all, I needed to stop looking for love in a place that only ever gave me assignments. If your mother called your pain an overreaction, would you still try to make her understand? Or would you finally accept that maybe understanding was never her goal? The rental cabin was nothing fancy, just a weathered A-frame tucked in the pines with a creaky deck and mismatched furniture, but it felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. The kind of place that didn't expect anything from me. No one here knew Cassandra the helper, Cassandra the stand-in mother, Cassandra the one who always took things too personally. I didn't have to smile if I didn't want to. I didn't have to explain myself. I could just exist. I lit a fire that night and sat cross-legged in front of it, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. My phone sat untouched on the coffee table. It had buzzed earlier 3 missed calls from Nicole, 2 from Mark, and a short-clipped text from my mother. "This is all because you're too sensitive. You always were." There it was again. The old refrain they used to flatten me every time I dared to feel anything deeper than a polite nod. "You're too sensitive." It had haunted every relationship I had with them. Every time I asked for a kind word. Every time I voiced discomfort. Every time I cried. My sensitivity wasn't just misunderstood, it was weaponized. When I got sick during my senior year of college and missed family Easter, my mom told people I was too emotional to handle things. When my ex-fiancé left me 5 years ago, Nicole said, "You need to toughen up. Crying won't fix it." Even when I helped raise Mark's kids after his divorce, he brushed off my exhaustion with a laugh and a shake of his head. "Cass, you always let things get to you." But here's what I've learned in this cabin with nothing but my thoughts and the hum of wind through the trees. Being sensitive isn't a flaw. It's a signal. It means I notice when people are in pain. It means I feel things deeply. It means I care. And for years I had let them make me believe that was weakness. But maybe it was my strength all along. I stared into the fire, watching it dance and flicker, and I thought about all the times I'd buried my sensitivity to keep the peace. How many times had I smiled through a gut punch? How many times had I apologized just to keep a conversation from becoming uncomfortable? And how many times had they used my softness to justify their cruelty? I picked up my phone and opened the text again. I stared at those words. "You always were." They meant it as an insult. But in that moment I felt something shift. What if I stopped defending my softness? What if I stopped shrinking every time someone flinched at the weight of my heart? What if I let myself feel everything fully, boldly, unapologetically? The fire cracked and something in me cracked open with it. I didn't reply to her text. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need her to validate what I already knew. I'm not too sensitive. I'm finally just sensitive enough to walk away. That night I wrote in my journal until the fire died. Page after page I poured out the stories they'd tried to rewrite. I wrote down the times I was there for them, the moments they abandoned me, the quiet triumphs they never noticed. I wrote until my hand ached, and then I slept deeper than I had in years. Tell me if the people closest to you always dismissed your emotions. Would you keep asking them to see you? Or would you finally choose to see yourself? The snow came overnight. I woke to a world muted by white, soft, heavy flakes, covering the porch, railing the pine branches, the narrow gravel road leading away from the cabin. For the first time in what felt like forever, I heard nothing. No cars, no voices, no buzzing phone, just the occasional crack of a tree limb shifting under the weight of winter. I made tea, not coffee tea, the kind that smells like oranges and cloves and comfort. I held the mug in both hands and stared out the window at the untouched snow. It reminded me of how it feels right after someone leaves your life. Strange, empty, but peaceful too. And in that stillness, something inside me began to rearrange. I didn't need to rush back. I didn't need to fix things. I didn't need to fill the silence with apologies I didn't owe. I could let the silence do the work for once. The thing about rebuilding isn't just the act of stacking bricks. It's also about clearing away what no longer fits, what's rotten underneath, what you only held on to because someone told you that you had to. That's what I was doing now, rebuilding without permission. Quietly, slowly, intentionally. I opened my laptop and made a list. Not a to-do list, but a no longer list. No longer waiting to be invited. No longer offering more than I receive. No longer begging for scraps of love. No longer apologizing for being affected. No longer investing in people who only notice when I disappear. And then just beneath that I wrote, more time for me. More time for slow mornings and long walks. More time for hobbies. I used to love painting, baking, curling up with a book without checking if someone needs something. More time to find new people who see my worth without needing to be convinced. I'd spent so many years performing the role of the strong one, the reliable one, the good daughter. But that role had a cost. It drained me, made me invisible, gutted my joy one favor at a time. Now in this snowy silence I was letting go of the script. And it wasn't about revenge, at least not in the way I used to imagine it. It wasn't about screaming or proving a point or writing long letters filled with everything I never said. It was about the quiet reclaiming of myself, because the truth was, I didn't want back into their circle anymore. Not if the price was swallowing who I was. Rebuilding meant choosing peace even if it meant solitude. Rebuilding meant decorating my life with intention, not for a family who wouldn't show up, but for me. I cleared out old photos from my phone. I deleted the group chat thread. I saved the ones that brought genuine joy. My niece smiling at the zoo, a sunset walk I took last spring, the photo of the pie I baked perfectly last year. Proof that I had good memories, even if they didn't include them. I also looked through my email inbox, an inbox full of little projects I'd put off, passions I abandoned while I prioritized everyone else. There was a photography workshop I'd signed up for last year and never attended. A recipe submission contest I never sent in my entry for. I bookmarked them both. There was still time. That evening I walked outside. The snow had stopped. The world sparkled in the fading light. I stood in the middle of the empty road, letting the cold kiss my face. No one could see me out there, and somehow I had never felt more seen. Have you ever had that moment when everything goes quiet, not in loneliness, but in clarity, where the noise falls away, and for once you can hear your own voice? What would you rebuild if you stopped handing your tools to people who only tore you down? It happened quietly, not with fireworks, not with a confrontation, but with paperwork. I had nearly forgotten about it myself, buried deep in all the things I used to handle for my family. A year ago, before things soured completely, Mark had asked me for help reviewing some financial documents for the family property, our parents' old home that they still used for holidays. The house we all grew up in, the one Janie hosted Thanksgiving in this year. It had been falling apart for years, needed a new roof, plumbing redone, the kind of repairs that cost more than most of us had. So I helped them secure a short-term refinance through a small local credit union. It was easier for me to handle the legal end of things. I'd worked admin in a title office for a few years and knew how to navigate the paperwork. My name had to be included on the documents as a secondary guarantor, because my credit score helped them qualify. At the time, I didn't mind. Back then, I still believed I was part of the family. But now, sitting in that cabin staring out over a frozen hilltop, I remembered the fine print and my signature. I opened my email and searched through the old documents. There it was, the clause I had insisted on including as a safeguard. A simple paragraph buried in the boilerplate saying that no significant renovation sales or transfers could take place without my written consent. It wasn't revenge. It was just responsibility. But now it was something else too. Power. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time, quietly acknowledging that they had left me out of the Thanksgiving they held in a house I still legally controlled. A house they couldn't remortgage, couldn't sell, couldn't even repair the foundation of without my permission. And they hadn't read the contract closely enough to realize it. I hadn't planned on doing anything with that knowledge. But then Nicole texted me again. "Hey, we're trying to get the roof redone. Can you sign some forms for the contractor?" Mom said it shouldn't be a big deal. No apology. No warmth. Just another request, as if nothing had happened. As if I was still the helper, the fixer, the reliable one. That's when the idea came. Not vengeance. Accountability. Because sometimes people only notice your absence when it starts to cost them something. So I replied, "Send me the documents. I'll take a look." She responded with a thumbs up emoji. That night I went over the contractor's estimate. I made notes. I drafted a new addendum to the existing agreement. Something subtle. Something simple. They could move forward, but not without recognizing me. Not without seeing my name. Not without acknowledging on paper what they had failed to do in real life. It wasn't just about the house. It was about taking back space. And maybe making sure the next time they planned something around a table, they'd remember who built it. Have you ever had leverage you never planned to use until someone pushed you just a little too far? What would you do with that quiet power if no one saw it coming? The call came on a Tuesday morning just after the frost had finally melted off the cabin windows. I was sitting on the back porch wrapped in a borrowed blanket, sipping tea as the forest woke up around me. A squirrel darted across the railing. Somewhere out of sight, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically at a pine. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not an apology, not a message, not permission to feel what I felt. Then my phone buzzed. A Pennsylvania number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, curious calm, picked up anyway. "Hi, this is Denise from Community State Bank. I'm calling regarding the refinance on the property at 64 Park Hollow Lane. We received a request for contractor disbursement approval, but it appears we're missing a required signature. From you." There it was. Confirmation. They thought they could skip me. Thought they could send the forms forge ahead to treat me like a vending machine of favors. But the system had remembered me even when they hadn't. I thanked her and said I'd review the paperwork. She hesitated. "I'm also supposed to pass along a message from the homeowners. Nicole and your mother, I believe they're hoping for a quick turnaround. Said it's time sensitive." I nearly laughed. Time sensitive. Urgent. Suddenly, now that they needed me, time had value. Funny how that works. I told Denise I'd take my time and hung up. 5 minutes later, Nicole called. I let it ring. Then Mark. Then my mom. Then a group text. "Cass, can you please just sign? We're under pressure here. It's not personal. It's just business. Not personal." After everything, that's when I finally replied. "You're right. It's business now. So I'll be reviewing it accordingly." No emojis, no softening. I let the words stand alone exactly like they had left me. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was stunned. For the first time in their lives, they realized I wasn't going to jump. And it rattled them. Later that afternoon, my mom left me a voicemail. Her voice was pinched but polite. She spoke like someone trying not to show she was nervous. "Cassandra, I know things got messy around the holiday. It wasn't intentional. We were just trying to keep it simple this year. That's all. But let's not make a big deal of it. Okay, family is family. Family is family. A phrase people love to throw around when they've run out of excuses. I sat with that message for a long time, letting it echo in the quiet room. Because family shouldn't mean you get to hurt someone without consequences. Family shouldn't be a shield for cruelty or a free pass to forget someone who's fed you, supported you cleaned up after your messes. Family should be better than that. And if it's not, then maybe it's time to redefine what family means. I opened the contractor documents, reviewed every page, made a few edits, added a clause of my own. All communications moving forward will be made directly, respectfully, and in writing. No changes will be approved without full transparency and documented consent. I signed it, scanned it, sent it back. Then I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and realized something powerful. They still needed me, but I no longer needed them. What would you do if the very people who abandoned you came knocking, not with an apology, but with a request? Would you answer, or would you finally let them feel the weight of your absence? The apology didn't come as an apology. It came dressed in excuses wrapped in soft tones, and laced with just enough guilt to make me question myself, if only for a moment. Nicole texted first. "Hey, we've been talking, and we realized maybe we handled Thanksgiving wrong. It wasn't personal, Cass. It just made more sense for everyone to go to Janie's. She has more space, and with all the kids, well, you know how hectic it gets." She paused for a beat. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at the message. Let it sit there on the screen, like it weighed nothing, even though it carried the sting of 1,000 tiny cuts disguised as logic. They always had a reason. The problem wasn't what they said, it was what they never said. No one said, "We're sorry we left you out." No one said, "We should have told you." No one said, "We see what we did." Instead, it was deflection, rationalization, evasion. Like my pain was a misunderstanding, like I'd misread the room they didn't invite me into. My mom called later that night. Her voice was syrupy sweet in that way it always got when she wanted something. "I think everything got a little overblown, don't you?" she said. "None of it was meant to exclude you. You know that, right? We were just trying to simplify." There it was again, that word, simplify. It's amazing how people use simplifying as a synonym for erasing. I didn't answer right away. I let her speak into the quiet, listening to how quickly she shifted the story, how easily she polished the guilt until it sparkled like concern. "You know we love you, sweetheart," she said. "We just didn't think it would be a big deal. You always understand." I almost laughed. She meant it as a compliment, but it was really a confession. You always understand, so we never have to try. That's what it had always been. They took advantage of my silence, my patience, my grace. And now when their foundation had a literal crack in it and a signature they couldn't bypass, suddenly my feelings mattered. I told her I appreciated her call. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't. Later that evening, Nicole followed up with a group text. "So, can we all just move past this? Maybe you can come by next weekend and we can do a little makeup dinner. Just something casual. Bring that sweet potato casserole we love." There it was. The pivot from "we didn't mean it to, you're invited again, now cook." It was almost comical. They had left me out of Thanksgiving, dismissed me, pretended I didn't exist. But now, with winter creeping in and the contractor stalling and the bank asking questions, suddenly my seat was open again. But not my voice, not my hurt, not my boundaries, just my hands, my dish, my usefulness. They didn't want me. They wanted the role I played. So I said no. I told them I was unavailable. I didn't lie. I didn't explain. I simply withdrew the part of myself they had taken for granted. And you know what? It felt good. It felt powerful. Because I wasn't slamming the door. I was simply stepping back. Quietly. Completely. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. Have you ever been offered a seat at the table only after you stopped asking for one? Would you take it? Or would you finally choose to sit at your own? The night before what should have been our Thanksgiving dinner, I lit a candle anyway. Just one. No centerpiece, no guests, no folding chairs, lined against the wall. I placed it in the center of the bare table where once I had set out name cards and cloth napkins. The flame flickered in the dim light of my kitchen, soft and honest. I had made a single plate of food for myself. Nothing extravagant, just roasted vegetables, a small chicken breast, and one scoop of the sweet potato casserole I used to make for everyone. Only this time, I made it for me. That was the difference. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was choice. And it was in that quiet moment of peace that I wrote the text. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was the kind of message that only comes after the storm when all that's left is truth. I sent it to the family group chat. My name still existed there, tucked between emoji-laden conversations and planning threads I hadn't been part of in years. I won't be coming on Saturday. I wish you all well. Thanksgiving didn't go unnoticed. I saw how easily I was erased. But I'm done asking to belong to a place that only remembers me when I'm needed. There will be no casserole. No second chances wrapped in foil and forgiveness. I've spent too long feeding people who never fed me back. I hit send, then turned off my phone. It wasn't about causing a stir. It wasn't about making them feel bad. It was about ending the performance. About stepping down from the role I had played so dutifully for decades. The fixer, the baker, the dependable sister who always kept the peace even at the cost of her own. I sat in the stillness afterward expecting something regret maybe. Panic, doubt, but all I felt was relief. And the strangest, most unfamiliar thing, dignity. Because the truth is, I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their late invitations or casual crumbs of affection. I didn't want to sit at a table where my absence had to be earned before it was even noticed. I wanted something real, and real meant walking away when it wasn't. It didn't take long for the responses to come in. Nicole replied first. Cassandra, come on. Don't do this. We're family. Mark followed. Are you seriously bailing again? And then my mother, as always, with the poisoned honey. You've always made things harder than they need to be. I hope you find peace with whatever this is. I read them all, then deleted the thread. The old me would have written back, explained, softened, tried to keep the connection alive even if it only ran one way. But not this version of me. This version had found her backbone in silence. And that silence was now a boundary, not a punishment. That night, I finished my meal, washed the dishes, and placed the last of the sweet potato casserole into a small glass container labeled with a sticky note for later. Because this time later would be mine. If your family only valued you in your absence, would you still show up just to prove your worth? Or would you finally say no and mean it? I didn't plan the surprise out of spite. It wasn't revenge, not in the way most people expect it. I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want them to feel what I felt. Not exactly. I just wanted to break the cycle, to stop pouring myself into a well that never echoed back. So instead of making another meal, I made a different kind of offering. On Monday morning, back in the cabin's quiet warmth, I opened my laptop and logged into the small account I'd been quietly growing for years. Money from side gigs, forgotten Christmas bonuses, little sacrifices, things no one knew I was saving. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. And I made a donation, in full, to a local food bank that had served me dinner during one hard winter in my 20s, back when I was laid off and couldn't afford groceries. Back when I told no one because I knew my family would have said I was being dramatic. I designated the donation in honor of my family. Yes, in their names. Nicole, Mark, Janie, my mother, each one listed separately. But none of them would benefit. The food bank coordinator was confused at first. You sure you don't want the thank you letter sent to them, she asked. No, I said softly. I just want to make something whole. And then I printed out the receipt. I wrote a card, one card, not individual messages. Simple, neutral, clear. This year I decided to give the Thanksgiving meal you didn't share with me to people who truly needed it. In your names, I donated food, shelter, and warmth to 47 families. No need to thank me. I've stopped expecting that. But I hope one day you understand that family isn't built by blood or guilt. It's built by presence, by showing up. And I've decided to show up elsewhere now. I signed my name, sealed the envelope with the donation confirmation inside, and mailed it to my mother's address. I don't know if they read it. I don't know if they passed it around the table like they did with my pies and my patience. But I do know one thing, it reached them. Because later that week, Mark texted me just 2 words. Message received. No apology, no questions. And honestly, I didn't need one, because for once I hadn't given for their approval. I had given to remind myself that my generosity didn't have to be wasted, that my heart wasn't broken, it was simply misplaced for too long. I thought about all those families sitting around tables filled with food I helped provide. I imagined the laughter, the chatter, the clinking of forks. People who didn't know me, who didn't owe me anything, and yet who felt my presence more than my own family ever had. That was the gift. That was the real Thanksgiving. Not a table full of forced smiles and forgotten names, but an act of quiet redemption. I paid forward what they refused to accept, and in doing so I reclaimed it all. So I ask you, if you had the chance to give your love to people who would actually feel it, instead of those who only take it for granted, would you still waste another year at a table that never saved you a seat? Or would you finally give your gift to someone who was starving for it? That Sunday I returned home. Not because anyone asked me to, not because they deserved it, just because I was ready. The air had changed. The sky carried that winter hush where the wind speaks in whispers and the light starts to dim before dinner. My porch was covered in leaves, the mailbox slightly ajar, as if the house had exhaled while I was away. I stepped inside. Everything was exactly as I left it. The folded laundry on the armchair, the book still open on the nightstand. The guest room still quiet, though the energy inside had shifted. It no longer felt like a space waiting for someone else. It felt like a room finally belonging to me. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, hung my coat, lit the same candle I'd burned the night I sent the text. Its scent, vanilla and smoke, lingered in the air like memory. But this time, it didn't ache. This time it smelled like closure. The casserole dish was still in the fridge. I reheated it, plated one perfect serving, and sat at the head of the table, the seat I always left for others. And I ate, quietly, gratefully, not for anyone else, just for me. Outside, the sun dipped behind the houses across the street. A golden haze lit up the edges of my living room. The world softened at the corners. No buzzing phone, no late invitations, no apologies dressed as demands. Just the warm hum of solitude and the quiet truth that had finally settled in my bones. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself, and in doing so, I had built something steadier than any place they might offer at their table. A home, a boundary, a peace that no group text could ever fracture. There was no dramatic ending, no final blowout, just a candle burning low and a woman who had finally stopped begging to be seen. This was my sunset now, and the silence. It was the sweetest part of all, because it wasn't empty. It was earned. Tell me if you could rewrite the ending to your family story, not with bitterness, but with peace. Would you let go, not for them, but for your own healing? Because sometimes the softest goodbyes are the ones that echo the longest. The candle's flame flickers lower now. The last bite of casserole has long since been eaten. I sit here, my hands curled around a warm mug, the light from the kitchen dimming with the hour. There's no celebration, no grand applause, just the slow unfolding of something I didn't realize I needed: stillness. The kind of stillness that holds your hand and says, "You made it through." The world outside has gone quiet, wrapped in the hush of evening. No cars pass, no phones ring, just the soft hum of a heater kicking on, and the quiet breath of a life being rebuilt one moment at a time. There are no more apologies I'm waiting for. No empty chairs I'm hoping will be filled. There's just this moment, peaceful, quiet, whole. I don't know what comes next. I don't know who stays or who drifts away. But I do know this: I will never again set a table for people who forget I exist when the food runs out. I'll feed those who see me, love those who love me back. And I will not be afraid to sit at the head of the table alone if I must, but never empty again.